the beginning of 2025, I made a few commitments to myself that will help me to actually achieve the vision that I have for myself as a professional disc golfer. The main three of those are having a backhand form work session every week, a forehand form work session every week, and 3 for putting, just practicing. Luckily, since this is Thursday of the first full week, I've already done 2 backhand full sessions, including just some other playing around since I have this set up down here with the net, the basket, and then that tripod in the corner, which I can just set my phone in. But I want to kind of document the process of my form journey throughout this year, probably in monthly installments, maybe a little more frequently if I find things that work that I want to kind of pass along in somewhat shorter videos. I'm not quite sure how long this video will be because what I want to do here is share one form cue that is working for me, then 4 main thoughts that I have about working with cues, and then kind of break down just how I walked through this session. And hopefully over the course of the year, we can see how much my form is changing and evolving, because my form changed so much from the beginning of last year to the beginning of this year. And maybe that's a video for next week or the week after, how that changed and what changed about it and what's potentially better. The way that I go about my form session later is not necessarily the best because I had making a video in mind, so I wanted to test out a few different form cues. Being curious about that isn't necessarily bad, but I'll address that in one of my 4 points. But first, let's get to what the cue is that is actually working for me right now. Let's first quickly take a look at just what you can see my form as a lot of times when I'm shooting videos. I'll just pull something from the last video that I shot, and we'll be able to see that a lot of times what happens with me is I am going up to throw, and I'll get a little extended and just a little reached high, and then I have to bring the disc low and back out. The cue that we're going to be working on is going to be stay tall and reach down, or keep the disc down is probably a better way to say it. Reaching is sometimes what helps me, what you'll hear about in a second, kind of separate my arm from my shoulder instead of wrapping and keeping it down there. And so if I just try to keep the disc down and stay tall, not extended in my low back, but to me tall is just like stacked. That's the way that I think about it. And the reason that this cue works for me is because when I'm in the gym with my personal trainer and I'm doing my T-spine rotations, I have a tendency to either get over crunched or stay overly extended through my lumbar and let my hips do the movement. So if I think about staying tall, I can stay stacked and reach down. That's going to engage my obliques on either side to get the disc down, and then I can throw from a more coiled position. So this cue is to help me coil better. It's definitely not something that I have perfected, and what you just saw there is going to look better than anything that I show you from my form work today, because in practice there's a lot that goes on. So the cue being staying tall, not extended in my either thoracic, which is your upper back, or my lumbar, which is the lower back, but instead just staying tall, staying stacked, good posture. Everything is kind of tall, but it's not like here, and it's not like overly crunched here. There are people who are a little more crunched than I'm trying here, and this is probably not gonna be the final stage of where my form develops to, because in my opinion, you use cues to get you to a point, and then you see what else is broken, and then you try to fix that, and then you see what else is broken, and then you try to fix that, and it's a never-ending journey, because as one thing gets better, it might expose a weakness in something else that was helping to compensate or being compensated for. It's a whole big complicated mess working on form over time, but for me right now, what I'm working on to get a better coil, staying tall as I throw, and making sure the disc stays down, because I can stay tall and reach back up here, but then that doesn't really help me coil because nothing's really going on here. Then I just go through my rotator cuff again. But instead, if I can stay tall and keep the disc down, now I feel a lot of engagement here. And then if I'm able to throw correctly, it kind of whips out that way. Hope you enjoy my little mess on the floor. You can barely see it, luckily. But I have just 4 quick ideas to share with you. And the first I already kind of mentioned, which is to focus on cues, not muscles. I have learned so much about the biomechanics and the anatomy of a throw and which muscles should and should not be engaged. But I found that trying to think about engaging them correctly, like instead of thinking, okay, you have 2 obliques on either side, you have external and internal obliques. And if I'm pulling this way, then this maybe internal oblique is contracting and this external oblique is contracting. I'm not thinking about, okay, let me contract this oblique and this internal oblique. I don't even know if I can feel it that well. I'm just thinking, what is the cue that will put me in a position where that is happening? It's much easier to visualize the cues than it is to visualize or to actually tell your muscles what to do, especially individual contractions, which can become a little important. Second thing, every body is different and cues work differently for different people and at different times, because honestly, your body is going to change. A cue that right now would be like absolutely detrimental for you could be something that works for you in the future. For instance, I used to walking backwards towards the disc. It used to be something that would absolutely like destroy my throw because I would be completely turning my hips backwards, belt buckle facing away from the target, and then have to throw. And now if I think about walking backwards, this happens. I'll slow that down a little bit here, but that is not me completely facing my hips away from the target. Instead, now because my body is different now, instead of just completely facing away, I might actually be getting into a better position than I am right now. It's probably not ideal, and it's not a cue that like I'm gonna be working with right now, but that's just an example of a cue can be bad or good for different people, and then even for you at different times, which makes things very difficult and confusing. Like honestly, changing your form is really hard. Smaller, more frequent sessions over one big, I have to work on this and like fix it now kind of session, which is what I did a lot last year, which is why I had such sporadic form work. It's much better to have smaller, more frequent sessions because one, it gives you way less pressure, and hopefully it turns into a habit rather than just something that you do when you feel like there's a problem. It turns into something that you do even when you're feeling good, and then you can make it even better or just hone it or really lock in that consistency of throwing well. It's not something that's like, oh, I'm throwing well, I don't need to do this anymore. It's, okay, I'm throwing well, let's lock this in. More reps, more repetition, and it gives your body adaptation cycles. For instance, like I threw earlier today, and right now I can probably go and throw and have another semi-productive session, but tomorrow I'll have an even more productive session. And if I take a whole day off, maybe the next day I'll have an even more productive session, just because your body needs time to adapt, rebuild the muscles. It's constantly changing. Doing 1 3-hour session every month when you get angry that you're not throwing as far as you want to is not nearly going to be as good as doing 1 session every week. That's just on a consistent basis or every couple days. Fourth is take it 1 cue at a time, unlike this session. So even though this is kind of like a twofold cue, I think kind of 2 things that get me into one position. The one position is kind of just this coiled position where I stay tall over everything, which keeps, in my opinion, a lot of the muscles that I want to be activated, especially when my core has not been active in the throw. So it's going to have to get used to this anyways. And so this might just be a week of the same exact cue for me, where it's like, okay, my core is not used to being active in the throw. Let's start by making it active now, and then see if we can further and further and further like twist the coil and get into better positions just by going into further ranges of motion. If you've ever, like, for instance, done like T-spine rotations, where you gotta do this thing, and then you just twist using your core, not like keep your hips in the same place, and you just twist. If I do this, it's gonna get into a further range of motion if I do this 5 or 10 times than that first time, because your body gets more used to it. And then the next time I come back, if I started here, maybe I start here, and it just gets a little further, and your body continues to adapt. And so it's gonna take a lot of time, and doing 1 cue at a time rather than what I do in this session, which is not gonna be good, but maybe will be helpful with all the cues that I'm thinking through and saying, hey, this kind of worked, hey, this kind of didn't. It's gonna be much more beneficial for you. So if you do test adding more, fine. Like, I don't think that there's any right or wrong way necessarily to do this. There's probably just more and less effective ways to do it. But if like you need, like my brain sometimes needs to just like, okay, I need to feel like I'm progressing more and doing more, know that it's always good and okay to revert back to the original thing. Like, I should have done that more. I should have gone back to, okay, I've tried these 3 new cues. Let's go back to just stay tall, keep the disc down, and then we can go back to what I was adding. And as long as I get back into, okay, I'm coiling, I'm feeling the right position with my obliques, and I actually feel it better doing those demonstrations right now, like nearing the butt crack of midnight, than I did when I was doing this earlier in the day, because my body was able to feel it a little bit and adapt, and then I come back, it's rested a little bit, I'm able to do it better. Revert to the cues that work and try to take it one at a time. Add a little if you need to. Everybody's gonna be different. This is just my opinion. I'm not even a coach, and I don't purport to be. This is just how I'm doing things and hoping to share the things that I've learned that have helped me along the way. So subscribe if you're interested in that. Let's get into the session. I thought about this cue, helped me to get into a better coil. Maybe it'll help you. If something that I said in the why helps you change, stay tall to something else, stay stacked, ribs neutral, hips neutral, whatever it needs to be, hopefully that helps you a little bit. And then I'll kind of get into my thoughts, and my thoughts correlate to some throws, and I'll show you those. So hopefully you find some value in it, or you just enjoy watching the process. Where we see the pixel as the first disc that I throw, I started thinking about keeping tension in my hips. And I started that when I started the run up. I didn't keep it through the whole run up, but when I did it well, it looked significantly better. And that led to my best looking shot, which I think was second to last in that video. Now I'm thinking, obviously, just keep drilling at those 2 things, but I see issues with my brace leg and my breaking shoulder. So I guess both of the deceleration points, I'm still coming a little forward on it. So first thing I'm going to try is that front leg, actually pegging a little more staggered. But ultimately, it's about keeping it in the quad while my hips sit correctly. Because that last throw of that that video, the one right before this, with the Numa, I wasn't keeping tension in my hips, and so it allowed my hip flexors to extend and open up. So I wasn't really as coiled. It was more kind of coiled or throwing through my low back than through my anterior side. And then for my brace leg, it's going a lot through my calf right now. So I'll kind of stick the leg. I'll like stick it out like this rather than being strong in my adductors and stopping and using my quads to break. I kind of just stick it out and reach almost through my calf. And then my calf does a lot of the braking rather than my quads. My quads are very inactive. So figuring out just those last two pieces of bracing to add on to this are kind of the main points of going from where I was to where I could be with hopefully a much better swing plane. And then a much better brace in general, which will help the swing plane because you're not trying to release before I over rotate. I stop the momentum and the disc snaps out rather than having to release it at least somewhat actively. Okay, trying those cues did not really seem to do much, if anything at all, as I was watching. I think one of the things that could potentially be more helpful would be to, I'm just always starting here, which is still a little like wrist above my elbow. I really more need to be starting here. And to do that, I might need to actually be starting, like, I just need to get the wrist below the elbow. Just not even trying to bring it up, just keeping it down the whole way. And then I think one of the big things is I think I'm still reaching a little too much, and I might try to reach actually through my back shoulder to get into a position where this shoulder is still congruent. I can push it back this shoulder and then wait until the rotation is initiated to start trying to retract my shoulder blade here. We'll try a little bit. It's not easy to figure this all out, but I'm grateful that the cue of stay tall and reach low has helped. But I think starting from here to trying to reach low ends up bringing it up rather than just start it low. I forget who does this, but maybe it's like Zach Nash. He'll like, and like with a little bit of that extra coil at the end through his mid back. Not super important. I think I do get too caught up on the minutia of things than just the overall movements. So I'm trying to focus on cues rather than make my shoulder blade do this. So I'll see what it looks like when I just keep everything, honestly not here, but here. I think just trying to, keep the elbow forward, almost Nicolas Antela-esque, where he'll kind of does a little wrapping. And then not trying to push this arm out at all. If anything, keep this arm where it is and push the back shoulder. And that'll keep everything more congruent in my shoulder here so that it can all spin and throw rather than trying to push it out. Because when you push it out, see what happens to my elbow. Even if I put it here, it's still like strained. So it's just like, it's possible to get back here. That actually feels really good. And I have a little bit of flex here in my lat, and then my serratus, which kind of wraps your shoulder blades. I'm just gonna try the cue of keeping it low and doing all of my shoulder coil with my back shoulder. I don't think that's necessarily the way to do it, but I think it'll detrain or kind of, it's like pendulums. It's swinging the pendulum from I'm so this shoulder dominant that this shoulder is just like hanging on for balance. If I focus a little bit on that back shoulder, maybe it swings the pendulum one way or the other. I can maybe keep this a little more over things, internally rotated, rotate backwards, be coiled and throw. We'll see. I definitely feel more oblique engagement on my left side. I don't know if that's because I'm extending and rotating or if it's because it's going well. I think instead of just trying to keep it low, I'm going to try to reach down. like coil with my back shoulder while reaching down is oblique engagement here and here. Kind of like lawnmower pulls. Not the movement you want, but it's like congruent, it's similar. That's not where all your power is coming from, but I think that's what needs to be engaged. So I'll try that a couple times real fast. Very hyzery. Now this is where staying tall and coiled. There's a lot of cues that are going through my head right now that I'm trying to build on. Honestly, partially for the sake of the video, I'll probably break it down as I'm actually practicing for the next week and just make sure I have the hip tension well. Stays here the whole entire throw. So it doesn't stay here and then I throw and everything just extends up. It all stays here. Could also help to contract the glutes a little bit. Stay there. Contract right here. Pyramidalis and like hip flexors. Stay hip flexed the whole time. Even there, extend it out of it a little bit. That will help engage my quads more. Because rotate, rotate. Just staying in my hips, hopefully, rather than throwing the hips. Rotate around the hips, or like your pelvis rotates around your femur rather than your femur jutting up into the pelvis and forcing weird rotation, which is what I do. And then from after that, it'll be doing that while also coiling correctly. This shoulder's coming back a little bit. This one's coming down. I feel a coil here. And then from there, rotate, which is bracing, but not like that because you stay in your hips. There you go. And then I'm gonna figure out how to utilize my mid traps so I'm not just all rotator cuff at the end. Try a couple throws, focusing on the hips and the coil, and then however it finishes is okay. I'm really focused on the first part of the throw right now, and then eventually, if I can get this all down and I'm coiled better against it, I need to figure out how to uncoil well because it's kind of two parts to the coin. So try a couple times with that. Just a lot to continue to like nitpick and really iron out. I really feel like by the time I'm in Texas for some tournaments, my form is going to look significantly different. I mean, it's only 2 months away, but just the little changes from like earlier this week that I showed at the beginning of this video to now is crazy. Obviously now we'll see kind of what translates to the course, but I mean, if I'm throwing the majority of my throwing in here rather than the course, which is actually going to be the case now that I'm going to be throwing into the net a lot more, having this set up and really working at it, and I'm going to be not filming as much because it's so snowy, things could change really well and really decently. So I'm really excited about the potential for all that and continuing to not really nitpick, but like find the biggest mover and move it and then see what else breaks. Because as you change things, as you try to throw faster, other things are going to break and you have to kind of figure it out. And then just like different levels going up, and some of it's with your body, some of it's with your technique. And as I'm able to figure it out more and more, I'll be sharing that journey with you. So I think next steps are going to be to work this out on the front side of my throw. Not necessarily worried about the coil as much as the finish. We're at the finish because you'll do that every single throw, including the ones where you don't need a lot of coil, and then we work on the coil after. I don't know if that'll help me like loosen things up, or if maybe that actually will initiate closer to my coil so that the coil will get better. But I'm just watching every throw kind of just go and just get crunched up in my shoulder and not be finishing correctly. So I think it's going to just be working on the brace and the finish, and that'll be kind of next steps for now. So a lot of learning today. Probably be a little bit more throwing today that you guys won't see, but hopefully February I can come back. Oh, February 9th will be my birthday. Maybe I post this video then. It'll be a month from today, and we can see how much has changed. But first I need to cut my hair. Thanks for watching. You guys are the best, and I'll see you soon.